stations to cover the entire UFO phenomenon over the past 20 years.
Welcome to Disclosure on Spotify, guys. We're here tonight with Marc D'Antonio. If you are listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure to leave a review, 5 stars. And then on Apple, you can do a written review. Definitely helps with the algorithm and getting us to wider audiences. Also, become a member on YouTube or Spotify, and then the podcast is at your whim, and you get your own little feed on our website, totaldisclosure.org. So again, today we're going to be talking with Marc D'Antonio, who is the CEO or president at SKYTour Livestream and CEO at FX Models, also the chief photo and video analyst at MUFON. Let's bring him on in and let's get the conversation started. I don't know why I'm so tongue twisted right now.
There's just so much to say, Ty. What can you say? When I first started this, I was just a guy interested in UFOs. This was many years ago, and my bio was one sentence. Okay, likes to study UFOs. I don't know how it got as big as it has, and I'm relaying only what it is in there. So I guess I've been active in the field, right?
That's
what it comes down to.
What I loved about, so if you click on your about info, and go into your MUFON title, under it, like the last sentence is, the day that we are bad at our job will be an interesting day for humanity, ... And I just like chuckled a little bit, like, cause your job is to make sure that we're not being not deceived, but that these videos and photos that are submitted with various reports for MUFON, whether they're prosaically explained, or are they something of that 1 to 3% that's actually interesting?
Yeah, and you know what the problem that we have is that everyone who submits their report, everyone, the data that they're submitting is unimpeachable. At least that's what they'll tell you. And they'll tell you what it's not right off the bat, rather than letting the analysts tell them what we think it's not. All right. And usually when they tell you what it's not, they'll say things like, these orange lights in the sky are not Chinese lanterns, because that's the first thing they thought of too.
Right.
And maybe it is a Chinese lantern, but you have to do your diligence to, and why would they say they're not Chinese lanterns?
Like
they say because
specifically.
Yeah, because they know that that's what they may be, or they're thinking that's what people will think they are, but they don't believe that's what they are. So therefore, they're going to tell you it's not a Chinese lantern. I mean, they're trying to do an end run around the analysis process and get right to the meat, saying, I got a UFO. Unfortunately, that's not how it works.
No.
Okay, that's not how it works. Okay, science takes the long road, unfortunately, and when we have to analyze data and try to figure out what things are, it doesn't start with you telling me this is a UFO, these are not Chinese lanterns. It starts with, here's an interesting video I captured. What is your impression of it? That's how they should be approaching it. Now, everyone's excited. I get excited. I actually thought I saw a UFO one night. I literally felt the adrenaline racing through me. It was an oval object just floating in the sky some miles away. I was like, I got to get my camera. I literally screamed back to my house as fast as I could, got my Sony A7S II, got my tripod, attached it to the tripod, set it up in this field, photographed this thing. It was an oval light, a round light.
You had that much time to do that?
I did, because it was sitting in the sky. And I raced home to try and capture it. And I thought, this is a once in a lifetime. So when people say you're usually caught without a camera, I was, very proudly saying, not me. I've got my camera, right? And then I started to zoom in on it, and I changed the settings so that I wasn't overexposing it, because it was at night and it was a round oval light in the sky. And I zoomed in, and I shut down the exposure even more, because I wanted to capture if there was any texture on the shape and what if
to the shape of it.
yeah, to see if I could detect what it might be. And so I zoomed in, and I finally got the right balance of the f-stop and the exposure. And to my dismay, I found that it was a UFO disguising itself as the Hood ice cream blimp over a baseball game in an adjoining town. It said HOOD right on it. I was like, oh man. And the letdown is really, truly awful, because you think, I've got it. They're here. This is real. Okay, but wait, I've got to take the data, got to analyze it. And when cooler heads prevail, you find the truth within the adrenaline rush. And unfortunately, in this particular case, it wasn't. I was really disappointed.
Yeah, I think I live on the 15th floor of a high rise. So, if you look out the window, we have this like beautiful window, and you can see over the not the mountains, but the hills of I live in Boston, but I'm in Cambridge. So if anyone knows Cambridge, where Harvard is, I'm like 10 minutes from Avi Loeb right now. It's a very hilly area. In Boston, the skyline is that way. And there's plenty of times where I've seen things over, flying overhead here that look like that the Tic Tac. But when you actually get a better or closer look, take a picture of it, it's most often a plane, or a drone or something like that. So
and its wings are usually invisible from below, depending on the lighting.
And
so
because
I get it.
Yeah, and it's sometimes so angular that the wings become almost like an optical illusion, like they're not there in the picture.
That's
so,
right.
I'm curious to see, in your career, how did you get to do all this? Like, why? How did it go from being interested in it to being the chief of a department for a mutual UFO network?
Well, it is the biggest aerial anomaly organization on Earth, so I gravitated towards it at age 9. Okay, I was 9 when I joined, 2 years after, as back then it was called the Midwest UFO Network, not the Mutual UFO. Well, when it was Midwest UFO Network, and Walt Andrus had dark hair at the time, the man who started it, I joined as a 9-year-old, and I was overjoyed to get my field investigator ID card, which I stuck in my wallet. And every progressive wallet I ever owned, that card was in there. And I investigated cases here in Connecticut as a 9-year-old, 10-year-old, 11-year-old, 12-year-old. And then over time, I started to realize that, again, because of experiences I had, that I don't think we're alone out there. In fact, I think they might be here. And I felt that's kind of stupid to say. Mark, you're an idiot for thinking those dumb things. It's like, it's not Star Trek. Okay.
Right,
but then I began to realize, no, it's not Star Trek. It's actually something a little more sinister. That's the wrong word, but not evil, but a little bit more sterile. They are here. There are observers from another place here, in my view. I've witnessed them, in my view. And I had an encounter when I was 9. I had missing time, which resulted in me having seizures afterwards when I came back.
Wow.
And they had to hospitalize me because I was having seizures from it. So they did something. I don't know what they quote unquote did. That was when I was 9. And that's when I started to look up at the stars as something more than just really interesting points of light. I looked at them as homes for other beings.
Right.
Now, when you get that awareness at age 9, you don't let go of it. So every science fiction show was my friend, even no matter how bad it was Okay, it
Because
might have
it
been horrible
allowed you
science
to
fiction.
explore,
It allowed me to
visually.
explore my mind and to understand what the universe was about. And I learned to discern fact from fiction a lot, because when you look at uh, how people report UFO sightings, they tend to add all these additional things that they think they experienced, and some did and some didn't. So you have to wade through what's right or what's true, and what might just be well, I thought it happened this way. And you want to get to just factual snippets, and then you assemble a montage of what might have happened from that and see if it fits with all the rest of their observations. If it does, then the rest of it could have happened as well. So I had the missing time. And then some years later, I ended up having a thing shoved up my nose by something. And it took place over 3 days. And the previous 2 days were like a preparation or something, trying to get me ready for this third day visit. I don't know. Sounds stupid just to say it. However,
No, I don't think it does.
however, yeah, on the third day, I remember something in my room, and I was asleep, and I was awakened. And like the previous 2 nights, it was 3:15 a.m. exactly when I was awakened. I was like, "What the heck is going on?" The witching hour, right?
The witching
Well,
hour, yeah.
or something, or the implanting hour. I don't know. But the thing was, when it was in my bedroom at that time. Okay, my wife was sleeping right next to me, and she wasn't awakened by this thing. Now, the previous 2 nights, we heard a knocking on the ceiling. It was like a what the heck is that? It's like just like this in this rhythm. All right, and I didn't know what it was. So the first night I heard it, I looked at the clock. It was 3:15 a.m. Okay, I went to bed. Just said whatever. It's a woodpecker that lost its head. It's a vinyl-sided house. Peck away, man. You're gonna get a headache.
Yeah.
That's what I thought, but a slow motion woodpecker. And then the second night I heard it again, and this time I got up, and I had greyhound dogs that I rescued from the track, and I leaned over my 2 dogs, Tycho and Kepler. Tycho and Kepler are, of course, astronomers' dogs, which is what I am. And
Yeah.
I put my face against the screen to look up and see what was up there in the house above on the roof line, and I got hit in the face with a flash of white light, and everything went black. I couldn't see a thing. I was flash blinded. And slowly a street light that had been visible started to creep back into the view. And when it finally crept all the way back into the view, I was still in the same position looking out the window. And I looked down and the dogs were gone. Okay. So they were spooked by something. I didn't yell. I said nothing. I just froze. And because I was quiet, because my wife was sleeping right behind me.
Right.
So when my eyes vision finally came back, it took about 40 seconds. I actually looked for the dogs, and I found Tycho hiding in a pile of laundry in the closet, and Kepler was hunched down outside the room with her ears way back. She was frightened. She was outside sitting on the floor.
Yeah.
Right. So I went over to my wife and I woke her up, and she goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "Just remember I did that. Okay. In the morning, and let's just talk about it." And I went back to bed. Okay. Morning comes around and she hits me in the head, says, "Why'd you wake me up last night?" And I said, "Oh, that's right. I had this weird thing happen. I had this thing, the dogs, blah, blah, the flash of light." And she just looks at me and she goes, "Wow, you're weird. Go to work." Right. So I went to work. And then the third night is when I woke up again. And this time I'm like, oh gosh, it feels like 3:15 a.m. again. I went to turn my head to see the clock. I couldn't move my head. So I moved my eyes. My eyes didn't move. My eyes were frozen forward. I couldn't do anything. All I had was peripheral vision. I was laying on my back. And I saw something from my peripheral vision pass in front of the window that was vaguely outlined by that distant streetlight I told you about. And then it came forward and got closer and closer and closer to me, until finally it got like really close, and I saw what looked like this, like a hand, but the hand was gray. It was weird. And then it went like this. It had something cylindrical, and it just kept bringing it closer and closer to me like this. And it went down below my nose, Okay. And it was dangling it like this, going back and forth like this. And I'm saying, what the hell's going on? It's the next thing I know, it's morning and I can't breathe. I'm lying on my belly and I push off the pillow and I see why I can't breathe. I made a hole in my face and I had been bleeding into that concave cavity, and I was literally trying to inhale my own blood. It was a lot of blood. So I got up and I said, oh man, it felt like somebody punched me in the face. And from that point forward, I couldn't breathe out of this side of my nose. And I did what anyone does who has a traumatic event like that. Of course, I took a shower, got dressed, and went to work and forgot about it. Who does that, right? I mean, so in other words,
you didn't seek any medical attention over that?
No, I was exactly. And so it makes no sense. Right. And actually, and because I couldn't breathe out of this sinus, I said, well, that's okay. I don't know why I can't breathe out of it. Maybe it's a cold. In other words, the illogic was just incredible. So I ended up literally waiting, another 4 years before going to it, or 2 years before I went to this ear, nose, and throat surgeon in Hartford Hospital in Connecticut. This is all on record, by the way. Nothing I'm saying can't be, verified. Right?
Right.
Sorry, hold on. That's a lot of water. Okay.
That is a lot.
And he looked up into my nose and he goes, "Holy cow!" He says, "This thing's huge. What is it? I don't even know what it is." He says, "It looks like a nasal polyp, but it's weird. I've never seen one this large," he said. So he says, "We can try and get it out." I said, "Yeah, let's do that." So we set up sorry.
I like that ring. Is that a ringtone?
I know, it's the wrong. Yeah, it is. Okay, so let me do it again. So so the surgeon at Hartford Hospital in Connecticut said, "I think we could take that out." He goes, and I don't think it should be something that's difficult. We can get it out like today. So he numbed it up and he goes up there with a thing to grab it, snare it, and pull it down. It was all numb. I couldn't feel a thing. What came out was something this big, okay, from that little hole. I felt like Arnold Schwarzenegger in Total Recall. Get it out, get pull that thing out of my sinus eye. Right? Remember that? When he's pulling that big ball out. So I got it out, or he got it out, and my first words were, "Can I have that?" And he was like, "No, I got to send it to pathology to find out if it's anything bad." And I was like, "Oh, it could be something bad." He goes, "Well, generally these aren't, but this one's pretty big. I've never seen one this big." He goes, "We got to send it to pathology." And I go, "Well, I really want it." And he goes, "Why?" And I go, "Why?" He goes, and I made the mistake of telling him about these 3 nights and this knocking and all that. And he laughed and goes, "Ha ha." He goes, "I'm sure it isn't aliens." I go, "No, of course not. I'm just, it was a weird dream. That's all." He goes, "Yeah, no, I'm going to send it to pathology. Call me in a week and I'll let you know the results." Okay. So I go home. I call him in a week. And the secretary answers the phone. "Dr. Lehman's office." I was like, "Yeah, hi, it's Marc D'Antonio." And, "Oh, hold on. Doctor has to talk to you." Oh, no.
Oh, jeez.
Like, what's going to happen? Is it head cancer? My head's going to fall off. I mean, I have no idea what it is. So he gets on the phone. He goes, "Hey, Mr. D'Antonio, just want to let you know, I'm sure it's benign. Nothing to worry about." I went, "Oh, so you don't have the results back yet?" And I hear nothing. I go, "The doctor, did you get the results back?" Well, and I'm going to relay it just the way he said it. The weirdest thing, in all the 35 years of my practice, this has never happened, he goes, but I sent it down to pathology and they seem to have lost it. But I'm sure it's benign, nothing to worry about. And I said, "Oh, okay." I just played right along. I said, "Okay, no problem." And I went home. Now, a couple years after that, okay, I had to go back to him for something else. And this time, I always put funny things in for the medical assistants who have to read the intake sheet. "What brings you here today?" "My car," that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
In other words, and he comes in, but in the occupation section, I do special projects for the U.S. Navy. Okay, which was true. It still is. I'm doing one now. And he saw that, and he walks in and he's smiling as he's looking at my intake sheet. And he goes, my medical assistants love you because you're funny. And I go, well, my wife's a medical assistant, and I know how boring those intake sheets can be. And he goes, well,
Yeah.
you really brighten their day. He goes, but I see here special projects for the Navy. I said, yeah, and I told him, I said, yeah, I do special projects for the Navy. And he goes, I suppose some of them are classified, top secret. Ha ha ha. I go, well, I mean, yeah, there's work like that, yeah. And he goes, I got to tell you something. He goes, I just gave up my top secret clearance this year. What? What are you operating on top secret nasal polyps in people? And he laughs.
Right,
No.
right.
He goes, no. I've been a consultant to them ever since I worked on another project for them. And this was a project, and he just laid it out. He said, this is a project where we launched a nuclear weapon up into the edge of space and detonated it. And I say, oh, I've heard of that, to see what happens in the ionosphere. Yeah, that's what they told everyone. But really, we were trying to do an EMP pulse and bring down an enemy satellite, and it was successful. Oh, I said, that violates every SALT treaty we ever had about the weaponization of space.
Right.
And he goes, that's why we cleared the Pacific for 1,600 miles in every direction around us when we did it. And my job on the project was to manage the trajectory of this rocket. And every now and then they would call me up to do other things, and I've been doing that kind of on the side. That's kind of what he alluded to. He didn't say that directly, but obviously that's why he kept his clearance. So I knew what happened at that point. He had just relinquished the top secret clearance. I didn't have top secret clearance. Mine was less than that, but still, he, as I did, if you had something come along that could violate national security, or it was even an inkling that it was a violation, you had to call your handler in Washington and let him know. And that's just what he did, I'm sure.
And he saw it on your intake. He pulls this. You tell him about the experience, not knowing that what
years earlier.
Yeah. So that's so wild. That's
so
wild.
he necessarily made the call, and what happened was, I think it's likely that he basically said to them, yeah, I had a patient that had some weird thing. He said a traumatic episode where something shoved something up his nose. Then must have rung a bell down in Washington, because I'm guessing that they probably came up and took it so they can analyze it themselves, right? Because at the time, this was 24 years ago. I mean, we're talking before all the disclosure stuff was really out. It's when the U.S. was still saying we own the secrets and we want to have the aliens in our front yard before your front yard, Russia. So it turned out that was the second experience after the missing time. So I realized that they're probably here, and they're here as, I think, scientists from another world. Yeah, and if you think about it,
but
we're trying to do that too.
Yeah, I was gonna say, do you subscribe to the theory that maybe they're interested in us for the same reason we're interested in, life underwater, or life out
in the universe,
out in the universe? Like, it's literally just as simple as that.
Yeah, I think it goes a little deeper than that, because and now I'm an astronomer. That's what I got my degree in. So I've worked in professional astronomy for years, and one of the things I can tell you is that carbon is the fourth most abundant element in the entire universe. Okay, carbon is what we're made of, and probably as a consequence of DNA. That's why we're bilaterally symmetric the way we are. But there's symmetry in every life form of some kind, and it might be related to how DNA replicates and so forth. But that said, carbon is the basis for our life, and we use oxygen in order to keep that that life form vital, right? It's very necessary to keep our life processes moving along. All right, it's the fuel effectively. So when you look at the universe, if you're an alien species, the likelihood that you're made of carbon as a basis is really good because it's the fourth most abundant in the whole universe. So we know carbon-based life can exist because here we are, right? So if life exists in the universe, it's probably going to be carbon-based by and large. And yes, that makes me a carbon bigot. Okay, you can call me that. I don't care. I am a carbon bigot. I do believe that life is based on carbon. And if it is, clearly then life forms that are on their planet are going to use oxygen as well. And what are they going to do when they start looking for other beings like them? And will they? Well, I can't imbue our curiosity on other species, but I can say that every single species here on Earth has a characteristic called curiosity. All of them. Okay. They're curious. They sniff something. They want to check it out. Yes, it might be because is that something I can eat? I'm curious. It's that curiosity is a built-in thing to a built-in actually characteristic because it helps the creature survive. Okay. And so when we see curiosity here on Earth, we can say, well, they're all carbon-based life forms of all various kinds, different DNAs here on our planet. They all have curiosity. So in my view, it's likely that life elsewhere is also going to be curious. Okay, that's going to be I think, a universal template in general because curiosity
Right.
is how you survive. If you're not
Yeah.
curious, you might not investigate that food you could have eaten.
Or the tool you could have made to.
That's correct.
Right, made something simpler. And
Yeah.
as humans, we do have I think oftentimes Joe Rogan says it, like if we stopped making the iPhone better and just kept making the newest one, and never progressed it further, we'd be fine. Like we'd live good existences. But it's like we can't stop innovating. We can't.
There's always another valley to
Yeah.
cross through.
Right.
The pioneers went west in America because they could. Okay. Now, keep in mind, by the way, that we talk about the oxygen in our atmosphere keeping us alive. And a species that uses oxygen elsewhere is probably going to look for a planet that has oxygen when they do their planet searches. We're doing it now. We're doing it now.
Goldilocks planets, yeah.
That's right. And well, oxygen in particular, because oxygen means that there is life there, most likely, replenishing it. Oxygen doesn't like to stay in an atmosphere. It'll dive right out of the atmosphere and bond with iron compounds in the soil and make rust. Witness Mars. Mars rusted. That's why it's red. Okay, that red soil is hematite. It's rust basically a rust of Mars. All right, because H2O water vapor was up in the atmosphere of Mars, and then the sun's rays could get through the atmosphere because the atmosphere was thinning as the magnetic sheath that protects the atmosphere diminished over time, the magnetic field of Mars, and the ultraviolet could reach deeper and deeper and deeper into the atmosphere. And as it did, it was able to disassociate and rip apart, in other words, H2O molecules. So the hydrogen got lost in space and the oxygen was floating around, dropped down, made its way to the planet's surface and bonded with iron compounds over several billion years. And this is why Mars is red, because the dust layer on the surface of Mars is the result of this rust compounds that formed from that oxygen that was freed up from the ripping apart of the water molecules.
Now, do you think that there is and used to be a potentially a situation where Mars looked like Earth, where it did maybe, because if it didn't look like that before something, and it has the big scar, right? Like
Valles Marineris.
What could have could another planet or some object that we it doesn't exist anymore or is part of the asteroid belt could something have happened where something hit Mars and just did that to it?
Well, the big rift valley on Mars is called a rift valley because it's volcanic and tectonic in origin. Mars doesn't have any tectonic plates per se, but early in its history, it looks like it was subject to some type of earthquake and volcanic action, and so we did get that rift valley that formed on Mars at one point. But as far as looking like Earth, I don't think it ever got a chance to look like Earth. Remember, it's a lot smaller than the Earth, and so at the size that Mars is, it was already hard for its gravity to retain an atmosphere because the atmosphere would just want to drift away, especially the lighter elements like hydrogen. Okay, on Earth, that stuff sticks around just a little bit longer, and that's part of the whole Goldilocks zone equation, right?
Okay.
So the bottom line is Mars had a lot of water at one time. There's a lot of features on Mars that were carved by water, including potentially parts of Valles Marineris as well, that rift valley. Um, like Gusev Crater, where Curiosity landed, that was a water-filled crater at one point, and where Perseverance landed, okay, that location too, Jericho, I think, right? That was another region that had water in its distant past. And everything, all the findings are consistent. Finding those little beads on Mars, these little hematite beads, those can only form like that in the presence of water. So things like that are very important to understand because it helps us see the genesis of what could have been life on Mars.
Don't some correct me if I'm wrong here, because again, you're the expert. Isn't there? It's at least a theory that I've heard. That there's the element on Mars that is only created through nuclear activity.
Oh yeah, we're talking about the isotopes. Yeah, the different isotopes. Yeah, I've talked to folks like that, and one guy, in fact, who was a champion of that theory. And the problem is that
that goes into like the ancient aliens types, and
and the thing is, those isotopes can also be created in natural ways, and they're worried about the quantity of them. Well, Mars did have sufficient impact to cause a lot of strange behaviors on the planet. Mars had collisions with other worlds in the past, smaller asteroids potentially. Why do we know that? Because we've seen Martian asteroids, Martian meteors here on Earth. In Antarctica, we've got meteors that came from Mars. Well, how did it get blasted off the surface of Mars? Through a major impact. And over billions of years, that stuff that, like a dust cloud around Mars, eventually some of it's going to reach us. And a lot of it has. And so why don't we just see Martian meteorites all over the place? Because we don't know exactly where to look. The only place we can look is in the ice sheets of Antarctica that have remained relatively unchanged for tens of thousands of years.
Right. And so something dark's there.
You can't miss it because, hey, what's that black spot 100 feet away? Right. It ain't grass. It ain't bark of a tree.
Right.
See what I mean? So it stands out. So Antarctic ice sheets are a great place to look for Martian meteors, and they've found meteors there.
That's awesome. That's such a good idea.
It is.
It's the simple things like that I love now. So back to your experience. So you're a professional, right? You're very well respected in the community, and it seems like. So how much evidence have you come across in your time at MUFON that has actually made a lasting impression on you? Is there anything that you can recall that like still to this day is unexplained for you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I'm not cutting you off, but I already got the answer for you. Okay. It was decades ago, decades plural, that I was on a nuclear submarine as a guest. I wasn't a sailor, never been. and I was seasick as heck. I mean, it was the
I can
most,
imagine.
it was
Yeah.
because on the surface there are sewer pipes with end caps and they rock and roll. Okay, once underneath the water though, they feel like you feel right now. You might feel a vibration go through your feet as it goes through a temperature change in the water, a thermocline. Okay, you might feel that vibration ripple through the sub, but you don't know you're moving at all. All right, you don't feel twisting and turning and bouncing and none of that. That's the movies. Okay, on the surface you can, but once you're underwater, you're in a whole new world. And I got really sick on the surface, as I said. The most fun I had being seasick. And
Right.
in order to get my stomach back, there's 4 sonar stations on a sub off the control room. You got the control room, and then you have a side little alley, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4 sonar stations. Well, this one was occupied by a sonarman, and this one was empty, as was this and this. So I sat the second one and said, "Do you mind if I sit here?" He says, "No, sir." Oh, okay. He goes, "Not doing too well?" I said, "Yeah, a little seasick." He goes, in little minor conversation, went back to work. So I just started sitting there and I was like closing my eyes and just deep breathing, get rid of that seasickness. Now we're underwater, so now it should come back over time. And it started to.
You're leveling out.
I was leveling out, yeah. And then finally, when right in the middle of it, I'm almost feeling like I'm falling asleep. All the voices in the sub, it's loud in these subs. Okay. It is loud. People talking, noises, alarms.
It's all carrying too. You're in a fucking tin. Sorry for the language. You're in a tin can, not a tin. You're not a tin can, but you're in a metal, thing.
You're in a multiple inch steel tube. Yes, multiple inch thick steel tube, and but the thing is, the sound never gets out of the sub. That's the whole point. That's the Navy's pride, is that the sound never leaves the sub. So I'm sitting there, and it becomes white noise. So I'm hearing all the voices, and then shh, high pressure air here and there, and beeping and clicking and little dings for what the helmsman was doing. And the next thing you know, I'm starting to drift off, and all of a sudden, the kid on the sonar. Okay, that kid that's, like I mentioned, over here, I'm here.
Yeah.
He says, con sonar, fast mover. And I'm like, oh no, torpedo. That's what I thought immediately. I'm going to die. Why did I say I'd go on this trip? It was sort of like a reward for work I had done. And they're like, oh, you can go on a ride with us. No, right. That's a great idea. Then now at that point, I was going, not a great idea.
Yeah.
And the executive officer comes around from the control room here, walks around this little aisle right here. Sorry, right here. Where is it? Where's it going? Oh, right here. And he goes to the first sonar room. Remember, I'm here. Okay. And he says to the sonar guy, what is that? What do you got? And he had relayed data to the con before, but he gave him a bearing in the range. But because of that noise I mentioned, I couldn't hear it because he was facing away from me. Right. So he was here talking this way to the XO, and I was at this seat here trying to listen. I was actually on the edge of my seat, put my butt on the edge of the seat and kind of leaning like it's something you do every day. Yeah, it was very badly, didn't really work well. and then he gave him a bearing and a range. I couldn't hear those numbers. But then he said to the kid, well, how fast is that? How fast was that moving? And the kid turns like this, sideways in his seat. Now, the seats don't move, so he's spinning his butt on this rigid seat that's nailed to the floor, basically. And he looks over at the XO and he says, several hundred knots, sir. And he had nothing to see. A sonar guy's got to classify every single thing they hear. That's their job. So if he can't, what do you do? Apparently, this kid wasn't briefed on the rules of this. So he said, several hundred knots, sir. And the executive officer, without missing a beat, just turned to him and said, okay, log it and dog it. Sir, yes, sir. And he turns back and starts doing his thing. And I'm like, no, I'm a very important guy now. See, I was asked to go on the sub, so I'm a VIP. I'll get some answers. So Mr. Arrogant here, okay, and I was more arrogant in my earlier days. Right. I got up and I walked over to this XO and I said, sir, I'm familiar with these fast movers. Is there anything I can help you with? He looks at me and he goes, D'Antonio, right? I go, sir, yes, sir. you having a good trip so far? Sir, yes, sir. Let's keep it that way. And
Oh, jeez.
he walks away. So I was like, okay. So that was
Kind of
decades ago.
checked you.
Oh, he checked me in the wall hard. I hit the glass,
Yeah.
man, with my face. Okay. In hockey, think of it that way.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so I was excited because something strange just passed through the sonar that they couldn't identify, but it was moving several hundred knots. Now that stuck with me. And when I got off the boat, it was about 2 to 3 years or 4 years later, I had to do a job for the Joint Chiefs down in Washington. I was
Oh,
working for
wow.
the Joint Chiefs on a project here that I did in my shop. I had to drive it down myself because it was a special project.
Yeah.
And when I got there, I met with one of the chiefs, one of the people that is in command of our entire Navy. And I sat with this guy and I said, in my head was saying, don't ask, don't ask, don't ask. But the words are already coming out. Sir, what can you tell me about the fast mover program? Oh, can't believe I asked that question. And he basically,
What is the fast mover program?
well, they called it a fast mover on the boat. This object that moves so fast.
So you're basically just saying to him, that's got to mean something. What does that mean?
Yeah, because the kid called it a fast mover, so he knew that something fast was moving, but he couldn't classify it because of the speed. And so I asked this guy, I said, what's the fast mover program? And I went like fast mover, like, because that's the words they used on the boat.
Right.
Okay. And he could have said, I have no idea what you're talking about, or I don't know, every sub's different or whatever. But instead, he looked me right in the eye. He said, oh, I'm sorry, Mark, I can't talk about that program. I drove home. I drove back from Washington, D.C. in a daze thinking, holy cow, it's real. He didn't say anything, but he told me everything. Okay. He admitted that there's a program called the Fast Mover Program that tracks unknown objects moving at high speed underwater. Now, that was decades ago. And I've been talking about this for well over 10 years now. Okay. So then cue up the Nimitz incident. Dave Fravor and teams and flight, the carrier air wings see objects flying through the sky. We know them now as Tic Tacs.
Yes, but there's also something under the water.
As Dave Fravor said, an object went down to the water and something was underneath the water meeting up with it, causing the sea to froth around it.
Right.
Now, what is that? Could that have been one of these things that we saw on
movers?
The boat? Right? Yes, exactly right. So now you see, but that's been my theory all along. Okay, if you're going to be a team here from another world, you're going to go where we are not. Okay, for instance, if you're going to go study elk in the Yukon, you're not going to go sit in the middle of their foraging paths. You're going to go into the trees, and you're going to set up a blind, and you're going to watch from a distance, aren't you?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. If you want to learn about these creatures, you don't want them to be alerted to your presence because then they will act differently.
Alter their behavior. Yeah.
Elk will run away. Humans will say, "Oh, what's over there?" And
they'll
give me my gun, Alice. And yeah, we don't want that. So I think that's what we're talking about, right? So I have a feeling that the creatures are probably scientific minded and want to learn about the life on this planet because they spent all the time to get here. And I'll explain how they did that, incidentally. I've been lecturing about this all over the country.
I'd love to hear that.
How I think they actually do it. And I'm not the only one that feels this way. There's a lot of physicists on board with this. Okay, now, so alien creatures then, if they want to study us, they're going to do surreptitious means, right? They're going to stick implants in our noses. They're not going to hang a big radio collar around our neck, are they? Because then you're not going to wake up from a nap going, whoa, what was that? With a big radio collar around your neck and go, oh, hey, any more pizza?
Yeah. Yeah,
ain't going to happen. So they use surreptitious means that the animal that we are will not detect because we are actually smart. They know it. And just like fire ants en masse can kill you. All right. And so they know that we are dangerous. As a single individual, they can manage us, but if there's a group of us, not so much. And
Okay.
that's why I think you hear only about people who are abducted, a person being abducted. There's some rare cases where multiple people have an abduction experience,
But they're
but
often separated.
yes, in most cases, it's individuals. The reason is because I think they can't control a large group of us because they know they can be hurt and killed or endangered. And I know that's probably true because you don't charge into a herd of elk saying, "Excuse me, hey, you there, the one with the horns, come here. I want to put this collar around your neck." Yeah,
Yeah.
you don't do that, right?
No.
Because they will stomp you to death. They're nowhere near as smart as we are. In fact, they're quite stupid compared to us, but they can kill you,
Right.
right? And that's
Right.
what I think those creatures know about us. We're
Right.
not nearly as smart, but we can kill them. So they're
Right.
going to take very careful means to manage us, and that's what they do. In my view, this is all my feelings, but I'm not the only one.
And you talked about them getting here. Now, David Grush, obviously you've been probably watching the David Grush, as I like to call it, the David Grush saga. He talks about interdimensional aspects, how we have bodies, how there was a treaty that was possibly signed. We have these craft, so there is some nuts and bolts aspect to it, but there's some biologics to it as well. So I'd love to hear if they aren't interdimensional, and you think they're coming here from a different planet, how are they getting by the people like you watching the skies?
Very easily, if the technology they're using is the technology I've been talking about. And I'll give it to you in a nutshell. Most people don't know what quantum mechanics is. Most people don't know the four fundamental forces of nature. We have the strong force, the weak force, electromagnetic force, and gravity. Those four forces, okay, we'll call them that, are ubiquitous in science. They're all throughout. They're the reason we're here. The strong force is able to hold atomic nuclei together. The weak force is the reason that those nuclei can sometimes change into another element, leading to more elements in our periodic table. Without those two forces, there is no universe. There is no matter as we know it. It'll be just particles. Right. Okay. Electromagnetic force is how we see the results in terms of light. All right. When we use our eyes, we see it with infrared, with sensitive instruments that can detect that, or ultraviolet, or gamma rays, et cetera, X-rays. All right, radio waves. You listen to them. So there is those three forces. All right, those three. But then gravity's the outlier. Gravity was always a mystery. We could always calculate what this is. Okay, when this pen drops. Okay, I can calculate the exact force on that pen caused by the Earth and by my minuscule addition to that force. That equation is F equals GMM over R squared. It's a universal law of gravitation, where the big M is the mass of the Earth, the little m is the mass of the pen as it falls. We can calculate specifically just what that force is on the pen and the force between the two objects. So we can calculate it, but we weren't able to characterize it,
understand it.
Yeah, the other forces, the strong and the weak and electromagnetic, we can describe them as waves in part and as particles. So they have a particle nature and a wave nature. That's duality. Gravity didn't have that. Gravity's out here without any of that, except now, as a result of seeing black holes merge, we see that gravity can make waves too. We have gravity waves now. Whoa! So where's the gravity? Where's the gravity particle? The graviton, the analog to the photon in the electromagnetic force.
Right.
Where is that graviton? Elusive. It still isn't here. Why? Because it may not exist in our four dimensions. What? We have X, Y, and Z moving through time. Okay. Those are the four dimensions we live within. our universe, we see through that. We calculate everything. We make all our spacecraft travel through the 4 dimensions. It took 15 years to get to Pluto traveling through our 4 dimensions. Okay, with the New Horizons probe.
Yeah.
However, what if there was another way? What if by using particles that may live in another dimension, you could drag your ship into that dimension by putting more or less of those particles around your ship. And then from that point of view, you're outside the 4 dimensions. So you could literally punch out of here, go into this 5th dimension out here, and then punch back in somewhere else in this 4 dimensions. So you
Right.
punch out and punch in. If you do it a lot and only over a short distance, then you appear to travel in a straight line. Punch out, punch in, punch out, punch in. Connect the dots, and you have a logical line between here and here where you just went. Okay? That punch out, punch in process is something that if you can do that, you don't even need propulsion. All you need to do is be able to punch out from one position and punch in a slightly different position. And where are you punching out to? That's the thing. That 5th dimension. What is that? Well, that's actually got a name. It's called the bulk, BULK. Okay, strange name, but it's a very warped dimension. And this relates to string theory. And if string theory is correct, then this variation of string theory is a very promising one. It's called Randall-Sundrum 1 or RS1. Don't worry about that. Just know that we have our 4 dimensions and a 5th dimension out here. The 5th dimension is highly warped. The further in you go, the farther the distance you can travel between jumps. So in other words, if you go really far in, then maybe you can go a good way to Alpha Centauri.
Right.
And one of the calculations was that they could probably do Alpha Centauri in as little as 20 minutes.
What?
Now that's watch the mouth. Yeah, that's true though, right? It makes you think just
20
like
minutes?
As opposed to 10 or 12,000 years that it would take us at our fastest speed. And there's another theory out there that Miguel Alcubierre came up with, the Alcubierre drive. And that was a drive that actually was a warping of space. So if you could warp space, you basically would pull space by you as fast as you can, and you could get to Alpha Centauri in about 5 days.
That's not bad.
No, but there's a lot of problems associated with that. A lot of technology that's required, especially the energy to make this warping capability known as a warp bubble. So
Yeah.
how is that possible? It's less possible, I think, than even doing it with this particle, this dimensional particle thing. Okay. And so if you think about it, if you can surround your ship with these particles, now what are these particles? Well, they actually have a name. They're called Kaluza-Klein particles, K-A-L-U-Z-A, and of course Klein. Kaluza-Klein, two mathematicians, physicists, who discovered these particles have this weird capability. And if you surround your ship with these particles, they actually form micro black holes. Why is that? Because the particles are 10 to the 17th times more powerful than the gravitons holding you to your chair right now. All right. So a KK graviton variant of this particle is extremely powerful. It creates a micro black hole. It lives a few nanoseconds and then it fades away. So you say, well, what good is it? Well, what good is it is that it will actually prevent Earth's gravitons from reaching your ship. So your ship would just not have any, it'd be like anti-gravity, the classic case, but you're actually just absorbing the gravity and not letting it reach your ship. So your ship is sitting there protected like a cushion of gravitons.
Yeah, like 2 magnets repelling.
Exactly.
Yeah,
in a way. Yeah. So the bottom line is
like that field would be there.
Yes, and if you play your cards right, then your ship, though, those KK gravitons, as they're called, actually live out in this bulk we're just talking about, this 5th dimension out here. So
how do we get them then?
Well, that's a very good question. I'll answer that in a moment. So if you have these KK gravitons surrounding your ship's getting pulled into this bulk space. If you just meter a little bit and not have too many of them, then you can kind of go and come back really quickly, oscillate back and forth, which is most likely how they do it, oscillate back and forth and become a fast mover. You could go underwater. You could pop out, pop in just a little bit ahead of where you just were, and just do that millions of times. So
A
you
lot
can
of people,
travel.
that claim to see UFOs, some of the most uh, um, credible cases, it looks like they're skipping.
Yeah, that may be related, but there's more to it than that as well. So
I didn't mean to
imagine
cut you off. I'm so sorry.
No, you didn't. You didn't. I wasn't gonna. No, that was a good point to make right at the right time. But if you think about these popping in and out and moving across, they're popping to one spot and then popping ahead, popping to that spot, popping ahead, popping to that spot, popping ahead. I'm exaggerating, but overall, it's making a line. What's the benefit of that? The benefit is that you could travel through a medium like, oh, I don't know, air or water, and not really be there. You're half in, half out, and thus not subject to the problems associated with the mass of the water over your head crushing you down, okay, like a submarine always incurs. So that's not a problem because you're neither here nor there. You're in this in between at all times. So you're not here long enough to feel the pressure, and you're not out of it long enough to be invisible, right? And if you just do that and meter it over time, you don't even need propulsion. Like I said, no rockets. Who needs rockets? All you do is have a good idea of where you're going to and where you're going to go after that. The to and from. That's all you need. And so you can punch in, punch out. Now, you ask, how would you do this? Well, as it turns out, all we need to create these particles and utilize them is a fusion reactor. Now, let's go back a few steps. It was last year when Lawrence Livermore announced that they had it was a major breakthrough. They had a sustained fusion reaction in a small little vessel.
I was going to say that was
a year or so ago or more. Well, that fusion reaction didn't return more energy than they put in. So no, it wasn't the fusion we want.
True fusion, yeah.
What we want, though, to see is that this reaction was sustained. They were able to keep it going for a period of time. That's a huge leap because fusion reactions are necessarily millions of degrees. And there's no material on Earth that can handle millions of degrees. So they figured out a way to encapsulate this little tiny particle of fuel and cause it to fuse under extremely high temperatures, laser bombardments, and not stop until they made it stop. Okay, that's good. The energy, the net energy gained from it will come in the future, but we got a sustained reaction. That's a major milestone in fusion. Meanwhile, let's go all the way across the United States, hop on a boat, go across the Atlantic Ocean or an aircraft, and go all the way over to CERN. Right? CERN, CERN, has all these particle accelerators. They have a big, giant 26-mile accelerator over there, and it's a big ring. Okay, and this ring, they accelerate particles, and they look at the collisions between the particles. And
this
they notice
the LHC,
the Large Hadron Collider. Yeah. Okay. Now they see these interesting particles there, and they want to actually build another accelerator to, in part, look at these particles and their capabilities. Those particles are called Kaluza-Klein particles. So the Kaluza-Klein particle is seen to be interesting by CERN and nuclear physics folks. And over here on our side of the pond, out in California, a sustained nuclear reaction a fusion reaction was able to happen for the first time in human history. Okay. Now marry those two technologies together, and you get eventually the fusion reactor that can create the Kaluza-Klein particles, and you get the accelerator to make the particles within the fusion reactor. And then you have the ability to eventually do this interstellar travel by doing this process. Now, here's one thing to just drive this home even more. When you look at a UFO sighting, most people say, as you said, it seems to skip across the sky. It looked like it was changing color. It looks like it was fading out and fading in. Well, guess what? every one of those characteristics is what you would expect from a highly powerful graviton shield around the ship, sucking up not just Earth gravitons, but a little bit of the light that it was giving off too. So the ship would seem to flicker in and out of view because it's surrounded by particles that take the light away, these micro black
Wow.
holes, right? And they would seem to make the object would seem to shimmer, and the object would seem to change colors. So this is all something that is consistent with Kaluza-Klein. Now, as an astronomer, I can tell you that light, little light in the sky changing colors could be atmospheric scintillation. Yes, it's a
Right.
process,
Right.
a point light of a star being disturbed by a cell of the atmosphere that's moving around. I got that. Okay, sure. And fading in and out, yeah, the limits of my vision. Okay, I get that. And seeming to skip across the atmosphere or skip across the sky in different places, I can call that the autokinetic effect, where the human eye cannot look in the sky at the same patch of barren sky and figure out that that's the exact spot it needs to look in. The eye's doing this all the time. Okay,
Right.
the eye's always doing this. That's an evolutionary thing. Okay, we can't control that. So all these things can be explained by the science we know, but we can't ignore the possibility that we're seeing Kaluza-Klein particles in play. That's the key here. Now,
Wow.
if that's not enough, there's one more big one. UFOs are reported as different shapes, right? But the predominant shapes seem to be round or triangles, right?
Yes.
You know why?
Well, I'm assuming it has to do with this process and it being steady enough, or I don't know. It has to do with the skipping process.
Let me just tell you.
Yeah, please.
In my view, they're triangular or round because I believe they're actually particle accelerators. They're generating these particles on the fly, and they're surrounding their ship with them. There's even a discussion available that can discuss how the particles are exuded, and released from the ship in such a way as to keep the central cavity of the ship safe while the outside ring is doing all the work generating the particles. Now, if that's not enough, okay, when you talk about UFOs getting here and the way they move through the sky, people say, oh, they just, no human could ever survive that kind of yes,
Inertial
that's right.
effect. Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
Well, know what they feel in those ships, in my view? They feel what you feel right now. They feel nothing. Why is that?
Or like you under the water in the submarine.
Yeah, we're moving quite fast, but if we stop fast, I'll go slamming into a bulkhead, right?
Right.
But these UFOs don't feel that. There's nothing like that. Why is that? Because they're not actually moving. They're punching out of one dimension into another. This is a stable spot. They're not moving. They're punching out from here momentarily, going to this spot, and then punching in slightly ahead. Punching out again, punching in slightly ahead. So they're here, and they're here. A snapshot of each position shows them not moving. But to us, watching in time, over time, we're seeing this.
It's like
we're watching
like
it
a
move across.
flip book. Remember those old, the flip book?
That's a flip book. The cartoon isn't moving on each individual page, but together it looks like it is. That's an excellent analogy for how this is happening. Okay, in my view. So I think that's how they move. So the visual effects covered by the Kaluza-Klein particles, the inertial effects covered by the process of punching out and punching in. All right, and the shape of the UFOs covered by the requirement to have an accelerator to generate particles. We have rings that are miles around.
Right,
but if they are sufficiently advanced, they probably figured out a way to make rings that are only about 30 feet around. Okay, like some of these UFOs are being reported. So you see, boom.
Right.
It's a boom. Now I'm gonna also say this is all this was premised on work that was done by my very good friend Bob Schroeder. He wrote a book called Solving the UFO Enigma. Now the book is highly technical, and I it's not for lay people. Okay, it's for physics people to understand.
Right.
So, but it discusses this process, and Bob is a very, very smart guy. I know him quite well. And he has other people, other physicists that are kind of on board with this. And not to say, yes, that's how it's happening, but this is as likely a possibility as any other. And that's all
And
you want to
this,
hear.
yeah, and if we can figure out that aspect of how they're doing it, and again move towards it ourselves, then you know.
And I think that's what we're doing.
Okay.
Now, okay.
Now,
You mentioned Avi Loeb. You said you're near Cambridge. Okay.
yeah.
I know Avi. We've worked on projects together, not projects, but programs together. Okay. And we've been on shows together. So Avi is a very smart guy, and his Galileo project, I've talked to the Galileo team. I gave them, my input. I think I can help the team with remote access to their platforms where they put them, because I do that now. My remote observatories, I run the observatory in the Arizona desert right from here, and I'm in Connecticut.
Yeah, I've never been inside an observatory. I really want to.
And they look very different. I used to work in a very large observatory. The telescope was about 35 feet long. It was over 100 years old and had the most perfect views of any telescope I've ever used. It was called an Alvin Clark refractor. It was 20 inches of mass of lens, 20-inch diameter lens at the front of the telescope.
Right.
And it was so big that the entire floor moved up and down to meet the telescope. When you change its position, the whole floor would have to move up to meet it. So if you move the floor down, then you could change its position to look up here. Okay.
Right.
But one thing you wouldn't do is try to move the floor down or move the telescope before you move the floor.
Right. Yeah.
The floor was
no,
a
no,
giant
no.
elevator. The big
That's
circular floor and this big giant dome was an elevator. It was cool.
That's so amazing. And these other facilities, like they're building in Chile,
Oh yeah.
right?
The
I
Vera
mean,
Rubin, yeah.
Yeah, these are going to be amazing. And look at what the James Webb is delivering us.
I
It's
know.
just phenomenal.
It is.
So, now that we
go ahead.
now that we, let's say for all intents and purposes, we know someone's visiting. We know someone's observing.
Yeah.
David Grush comes out. He says that we have this stuff when we're reverse engineering it. Where do you stand on what's been going on lately?
That's a good question. I saw Ryan Graves, David Grush, and Dave Fravor, testify in Congress. And I felt that Graves and Fravor were very believable and truly understand the dilemma that we're facing. Grush was that wild card that I didn't know anything about. And then when I saw David Grush come out and start to talk about, well, we have alien bodies, we have crashed ships. And then he said, but I can't tell you about that unless we go into a classified setting.
Yeah, skiff. Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, a skiff. Yeah. Now, a skiff is just a room. Okay. But
Yeah,
any materials in there can't leave that room. That kind of thing.
Right.
Well, anyway, the problem is that not that the aliens might be real. That's not what the classified part is about this. The classified part about this is how they were caught, how they were seen, the technology used to uncover them, and the technology used to pull back their veil. That's the classified part. That's what he couldn't talk about. Nobody would be excited to hear that aliens are real and hear it from the president of the United States. Okay. They'd be perfectly okay with that. But what the administrations and agencies especially aren't ready for is to then say, and here's how we detected them, because that's going to be the next question.
Yeah.
Really? You found a ship on the ocean floor? How did you find it?
How?
Oh, that's classified. We can't tell you that. And see, so they avoided that whole question. And so when he said, I could tell you how we got these ships in a classified setting, it was because the technology to unveil these classified ships, to capture them in action, was the classified part.
Do you and I mean, do you think that we've been reverse engineering these craft?
I hope we are. I would hope
Yeah.
we are. I mean, who knows? I mean, who wouldn't, right? If we actually
Right.
had a
Right.
ship, you're darn right we're going to reverse engineer it,
Right.
and we're gonna reverse engineer the creatures that live in it. Okay, what's
Yeah.
that mean? It means that these creatures might be biological robots.
Right.
Okay,
A lot of people talk about that.
I do all the time as well because I
Advanced
think,
AI.
yeah, well, hey, we create robots in our likeness, and we look forward to having people walk, Aunt Sally when she's 90 down the road. Okay, but I can't do it, so we'll just get Mel the robot to do it. Mel, go
Yeah.
walk Aunt Sally to the store. Yes, sir. I'll be right back. That kind of thing. I mean, that's
Yeah.
going to be a reality someday. And
Yeah.
we once we start doing biological robots, then we're going to cross another major precipice. That precipice is going to be, if these are biological entities, are they also sentient life forms?
Right.
Yes, we assembled them, but are they sentient?
Are they
Are
sentient?
they
Are they
life forms all their own? Are they intelligent? Are they aware,
do
self-aware?
yeah, are they self-aware is the main main
Yeah.
question. And
And who says they're not if they're biological? So what I'm getting at is, we can't assign our morality to an alien species. We can't sit back and say, hey, we can't do that. That's not moral. You can't make biological robots and send them to go do something. And if they die, you just, dissolve them and move on. That's not how it works.
yeah,
This life is
no,
precious.
no.
Maybe not to some other creatures in the universe. It may not be that way.
Yeah,
You
we
know?
can't look at this through a human lens.
No, we can't. And that's one of the main problems, especially, I'm not a fan of guys like Stephen Greer. I don't like what he does. Because there's always a price tag associated with it that's
Oh, and
exceedingly
yeah,
high, and I'm not.
yeah.
I've caught him actually saying falsehoods multiple times, and his voice is bigger than mine, so I just let it go. It's whatever. Have at it. If people aren't
Unfortunately,
able to find it out, then that's their thing.
unfortunately, I think people want to believe him so badly, but like he's also this guy who preaches love and light, and come pay $10,000 for a weekend and meditate with me. Yet he's always pointing the finger at everybody, and has um no one in the, like, every single person from the government is either you know um running a psyop, or he's so contradictory in his nature that it's
And you know what else,
yeah,
Ty?
yeah.
You know what else I can tell you right now? He was a medical doctor. He has absolutely no credentials to make the judgment calls he's been making in the ufology field and the physics field. He has no credentials for that. Now, that doesn't mean you got to have a degree. That's not what I'm getting at. What I'm saying is, he's as much out of the water on these issues as anyone else is, okay, as we are, as I am. I make what I think are logical deductions about things. I could be wrong, right? And I never say that I'm always right, ever. I mean, I used to. I was a little more arrogant in younger years, but I got smacked down too many times by the reality of truth to
Right, right.
realize that, right? So now I'm way more open minded, okay, which is why I'm doing your show, because I'm open minded. If I wasn't open minded, I'd say, yeah, I'm not going to talk about aliens, okay.
Yeah, right, right.
But I'll tell you this, okay, there's people in the scientific field that would rather you not know that they're watching what I'm doing, okay, and some pretty big names, and the reason is because they don't want to be associated with it yet.
Yet.
That's the word. Now, they used to say, that's just baloney, we're not going to even look at it. Now they're saying, well, I don't want to be associated with it yet. See what's happening? It's a slow shift toward the reality of, hey, okay, there may be some things out there. I wonder what this is. Okay, let's just wait and see. I need a little more information here.
And
I'll take it.
honestly, it would make the world more fun. More a little bit more magical, right? In a sense, right? We're brought up and we're raised to think that the world is black and white, but we don't realize that how much gray there is.
That's right. That's right.
It baffles me. I mean, the paranormal aspect of things, sometimes I get a little bit, the Bigfoot stuff and ghosts and I don't know. I'm agnostic, I suppose. But what's your view on that aspect? Because this isn't just one phenomenon; it's it's phenomenon.
It's a family phenomenon. Okay. Well, one of the other experiences I didn't tell you about was the fact that I started seeing people that weren't there. And there's certain issues of the brain. I had brain surgery about 30 years ago, and it saved my life. But it wasn't cancer. It was just something growing in my head that was benign. Well, anyway, since then, I started, hearing people talking in the room that weren't there. I saw people that weren't there. I have no idea what this stuff is. So I figured, it's a medical thing. It's related to the maturing of the wound inside my head where they did the work. And so I left it at that. It wasn't like voices saying, kill your dog, nothing like that. It was just, it was like you're in a room full of people talking. And it's just like an annoying, bunch of sounds, as they call it, a cacophony of sound that's filling the room at all times. And no matter what I'm doing right now, I'm hearing it. And so it's always there. However, when I started to see things, people that weren't there, and creatures, animals, I couldn't explain that. And I actually went to a neurologist to try and have him tell me how the brain could manufacture. And I said to him, my theory was, I think my brain is replaying old memories and just presenting them on the screen of my mind, or however, it's why I'm seeing these things. And he's like, well, there is an area of the brain that's responsible for, and he went through a whole theory as to what could have been happening. But all that went out the window when I was working on a project with the late, great Douglas Trumbull, a good friend of mine. I mean, he Close Encounters of the Third Kind. He did all the effects, right? In 2001: Space Odyssey.
Yeah.
The guy was he was
a legend.
one of my best friends, and I was working on a project for Doug for a movie we were doing, and I was all excited about it. It was 3:30 in the afternoon, and all of a sudden I'm working on this thing. I'm actually working on a plumbing hose for some liquid nitrogen we're going to use to make this smoke thing. Okay, that's the visual effects part of me. And in walks this dog into my shop, and the thing about the dog was it looked like those people I saw. It was semi-transparent, without any kind of shine to it. It was like water without the shine, kind of like a shadow. It moved in, it circled around, it sat down and started doing this rhythmic motion. It looked like it was licking itself. And I'm like, here we go again. I don't have time for this. I got to the point where I was just ignoring it. Well, this time I just walked over to it and I looked down and I'm seeing it in 3 dimensions from above. When it's a projection from the brain, you can think that's a 2D image because that's all you're going to see. You don't have the backside. And the backside doesn't exist because you didn't see that. So it can't make that up. So I walked over, I looked over the top of it, and I saw the backside of this doggish creature. I was like, whoa, that thing might really be here. So I did something crazy. I actually stepped on it with my left foot. And like stepping on a dog's tail, it made no sound, but it got up and it started running out of the room. That's all great, except for one problem. It took my foot with it. And it started dragging my foot along. And the next thing you know, my left leg is extended. My left knee is almost hyperextended. It got snapped out. And then my left leg went right up in the air like this. My right leg followed. Okay. And then bam, I came down on the back of my head on the concrete floor.
Oh,
I was literally upended. And it was like a bungee cord around the base of your ankle, and getting yanked really, really hard. So I ended up getting up,
That's
bleeding
terrible.
bleeding in the back of my head.
But
And
that's pretty
thought
wild.
I thought it was the coolest thing, and that's when I realized I know what this is. Okay, other people would call these ghosts. So at least in this case, I think what I'm seeing is a parallel universe intersection. It's an
Yeah.
intersection because we have parallel universes that are like onion skins intricately meshed together. And so if this one is sticking up into our universe a little bit, that little point you see right here, that little
Yeah.
point could be a visual thing that you can see, maybe. Maybe that's a
Right.
dog. Maybe that's some other creature doing whatever it's doing, because life is generating these motions elsewhere in these other dimensions or these other universes. So I coined the term parallel universe intersection, PUI, and I think that might be what's going on. And I'm not saying
So
that
you're
ghosts aren't
basically
real.
you're basically piercing the veil.
Yeah, that's exactly right. But actually,
But
it's
you're
something even more,
interacting with it.
which that's where I was going next. That's the most important thing. What we're looking at here is something that is rudimentary communication, possibly between parallel worlds, parallel universes. So we don't yet know how to traverse between parallel universes, but maybe that's something that's also in our future. It's not just one thing or another. Okay, I think this theory of travel is possible. I also think that parallel universes are possible. And why, anyway? Why would we think that? Well, because for one thing, the universe isn't really massive enough to have been formed by a big bang. There's not enough mass. We may find it someday, and the whole idea of parallel universes might go by the wayside, and we'll find out that those really are ghosts of some kind. But the
Right.
truth is, we don't have enough mass to have made the Big Bang. So maybe we were just a little squirt off of a much bigger bang, and that's very possible. I don't know.
That's that. So when you say a bigger, so a bigger bang, can you explain that a little bit more? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no. When we look at the origin of the universe, cosmology loves to tell you that we formed with a Big Bang.
The Big Bang, yes.
Right. Okay. Well, that appears to have happened. We see an accelerating universe, actually an expanding, accelerating universe. We thought it was just an expanding universe, but now it's accelerating as it goes out further. That's the whole dark energy world, which we're not going to get into. But that acceleration outward was from a certain event, and that event is what we call the Big Bang. Now, the Big Bang may not have been big enough, because there wasn't enough mass to make the Big Bang. So it's possible that we piggybacked on another universe that also came into being at the same time.
Wow.
So he came along, and then we popped out of it or popped along with it, and thus made our little universe. All very interesting theories, and that's all there'll be
wild.
is theories until 500 years from now, when we have a better handle on quantum mechanics and quantum fields, and know exactly how the Higgs field works. We have an idea, but see, there's so much more to the universe. Because you talk about objects having mass, and now you got to go into the whole Higgs field thing, and it gets really dense really fast.
It gets complex and scathy, especially for your average person, because it's too much. But I mean, I really love this is amazing. Thank you. I mean, I'd love to have you back on for like a more in-depth conversation, or
just
talk about
pick any one of those things we went through, and we can just go riff on that for an hour or so. I mean, it's just amazing how much. Yeah. And by the way, I want to also mention too, let's not forget these observatories that we create. They're called SKYTour Livestream. Okay, SKYTour is one word, Livestream is another word, and they're on YouTube. We're streaming on Rumble, Twitch, Trovo, Facebook, YouTube, and we have thousands of people that have subscribed. And if it's clear tonight, we're going to open up from here in my bunker here in Connecticut.
Okay.
And we're gonna open up the Arizona Observatory, and then we'll stream from there. This telescope you see right behind me, that's the East Coast Observatory telescope, and it used to be in a dome. I had a dome on the front lawn of my house, a real dome, and it was the talk of the town. But I outgrew it. So now I need something that's a little more reliable than a plastic dome. This wasn't good enough, so we're going to be doing a building that has these linear actuators to lift the roof off and put it back on, and then the telescope will be exposed to the sky, and then we can do more work with this telescope, than it was supposed to do in the beginning. Okay. Well, anyway, so we show people the universe nightly basis. It's just amazing. People see these nebulae unfold just right before their eyes. And we cover maybe 10 to 15 or more objects a night. And people get to see all these things that are just amazing.
So beautiful.
Yeah. And we have an Etsy store where people can pick up, mugs and things with all of our photos emblazoned on them, and T-shirts and blankets and everything under the sun.
Well, I would love to. I would love to jump into one of these streams and check out what you guys are doing. So
if I know you're there, I'll call you out and say hello, or I'll bring you on with us. I mean, not a big deal.
Oh yeah, hell yeah.
Yeah.
So other than that, where can people find you, and what are you currently working on, like, openly, other than the telescope?
Well, I'm doing some Navy work, which I can't really talk about, but that's okay. The telescope is really the only public thing. It's a 501c3 organization that we started, and we are looking to make actually a mobile observatory system that we can take around the country to schools and universities and city streets and show people the universe like never before. From underneath the veil of really bad light pollution, you can still see all kinds of really cool stuff.
So does it cut through the light pollution, or is it
the filters that I use will actually cut through a majority of the light pollution, and people can see galaxies like they've never seen before. Okay,
wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. Now in our Arizona Observatory, there is very low light pollution as it is, and I'm using the filters in addition. So not only are people seeing things quickly, we take pictures that rival large observatory photos, and we do it in 20 seconds.
Right.
Instead of like 40 or 50 hours of time. We can't rival those real serious guys that go into something called narrowband imaging, because we're not doing that. We're doing broadband imaging, but we're doing it with special filters that allow us to show the sky to a good degree. And for people to see these things, it's amazing.
Yeah, you're doing a huge service to the community and to people that love sky watching and learning more about what it is out there. That it sucks because I live in a city. Like, I literally live in the Boston area. So on average, there's 100 to 200 stars maybe scattered that you can see on a good night, but for the most part, I can't see much. I'm driving to Canada soon, so once I get to Niagara and start getting into Canada deeper, I can't wait for that view. I really can't.
That'll be very pretty. I'm sure you'll have a good time.
Yeah, I'm hoping.
I did a movie with Doug Trumbull up there on Nikola Tesla, which is another forgotten genius. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, Tesla is one of my favorite people.
Yeah, he had a lot of interesting physics and thoughts on generating power and stuff. So, I mean, I think it's very important that we stay open-minded in science, and so that's why I do what I do.
So to wrap up the conversation, you don't think you think we're being observed, and do you final question would be, do you see us interacting on a large scale in anytime soon?
Um, all the previous, but not the anytime soon part. I think that disclosure comes out little by little, and it only. I don't know the motivations for Grush and Graves and Fravor coming out and giving this information up front right now, but they are the most credible people we've had ever do it, and they did it to the U.S. Congress. So this is something that's very important. So
Huge.
disclosure is starting, and now I think the era of the tinfoil hat is going to go away.
It is.
Yeah,
It is.
Mm.
And that's,
And-
that's why I do the show now. I used to do pop culture stuff.
Mhm.
But I just lost my passion for it, and I've always been passionate about this subject. And when I get to talk to people like you, it's such a treat. I got to have Tim Burchett on the show the other
Tim
day.
Burchett,
Burchett. I always say his name wrong.
Doesn't
But
matter.
I've created so many relationships with all these really, really cool people. And at any time I can reach out and say, take a look at this. Can I get a comment on this? And now you're one of those guys, man. So I just want to say thank you for your time tonight, and we hope to have you back.
All right, Ty. Well, thank you. And remember, if anyone wants to find us, it's at SKYTourLive.org is our actual portal to get to all things SKYTour live stream. So SKYTourLive.org.
Yep, and I'll put all the links are going to be in the description below for anyone who wants to check those out. And don't forget to check out what we got going on if you want to become a member across YouTube or Spotify. It's pretty much the same thing. It's actually exactly the same thing. And you get the podcast, bonus content, ad-free content, a yearly gift, all that good stuff. So definitely worth it. Interviews like this go up early for you. So if you are a member, we want to say thank you. And let's keep exploring the unknown together.